Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much once again for being there. This is Rafa from Mystic Times. Today, my dear friend Erik Arneson, he/him, is here with us, the Reverend. We were just speaking. We'll get into the topics we want to touch on today, which are extremely fun. We're going to talk a little bit about magic and practice and living a more aligned and peaceful life with the help of magic. But we were just talking about the small things in life, the weather, the changing weather, and me wearing a sweater. Maybe it's the first time I've worn a sweater for the show. It's getting a little bit chilly here. And just now we were talking about a little bit about our experience with podcasting. Erik, your show has been going on. Is it also like 4 years, maybe 3, 4?
Yeah, I think so. And I had a show before Arnemancy that went on for a couple of years also. I think I just passed, I think at the beginning of the year, I just hit my 5th anniversary of the first podcast episode I ever released or was ever on. So that's pretty exciting.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I didn't know about the one before, but I was reminiscing or remembering that, yeah, your show started, I'm sure started before mine, because I remember listening to you. I think it was with one of your guests who was doing an astrology reading for the year, I think of 2019.
Oh yeah, maybe.
He was doing like the solar return or something like that.
Yeah, that would have been my good friend Andrew Watt.
I think so, yeah. And I remember it was one of the episodes that kind of, I mean, I wanted to do a podcast for so long, but the ones I listened to very close to the date when I finally decided, okay, I'm going to do it. So it kind of inspired me close to that. And I think you also had an episode on Dune.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that
yeah,
one
a couple of them
was a lot of fun.
Oh man, yeah. I think my favorite Dune episode. Dune is such a funny topic because there are, there's a lot of weird esoteric symbolism in Dune, but there's like this really, really enthusiastic fan base that gets like really into it, really nerdy about it. So if you talk about Dune on a podcast and you get stuff wrong, you get so much stuff on Twitter and like emails saying you pronounced this word wrong. Oh, if only you'd paid more attention to this. I'm like, oh God. Because when we did that episode, I didn't know what the topic was going to be. I had just gotten some new podcasting gear and I invited sort of like my podcasting mentor over to help me set it up and test it. And I was like, you could be my first guest on this new setup. And he just showed up. He's like, here's our topic. Yeah, that was pretty fun. But
yeah, and Dune has a bunch of strange words or hard to pronounce words for sure.
Oh yeah, the Kwisatz Haderach.
And I don't know how people know how to pronounce them. Is there like a book where it's the pronunciation is explained? I don't know about that.
I don't know either. I wonder if there might be like old interviews with the author, maybe, or something like that. Like I just can't imagine how anybody knows how to pronounce all of those words. So which means that I'm just going to make up my own pronunciation, and that's just going to have to be. That's how the world is just going to have to work.
Which is the origin of every spoken language, is just a convention of, okay, let's call this, or let's speak this in this, let's pronounce it this way. It's like if you look at English or German or whatever, and you don't know the language, you look at the letters one after the other, and you're like, how do you pronounce this?
Oh, God.
Okay, let's say, for example,
Well, I was just thinking, like, English has horrible spelling and pronunciation. But Spanish is like a really interesting example because there's a pretty standard kind of pronunciation to the spelling. But then you look at, the fact that Spanish is spoken by what, like, is it 1 billion people maybe across a huge swath of space? And, if you compare like a Argentinian speaking Spanish to a Mexican speaking Spanish, it sounds so different. So but they still follow their own rules.
Yeah, and also the idea of what's this called, your accent, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of got something to do with that, because look at England, for example, or the UK. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's people who pronounce the same words within the island itself. They pronounce stuff very differently, to the
Mm-hmm.
point that some of them, you listen to them and you kind of, what language are you speaking? I don't know what you're talking about, until
Yeah.
you get a certain practice at hearing it, or like
Mm-hmm.
the Jamaican kind of accent, for example. That's like the best or the most fun accent for me. I love that, and the slang that they use, and it's
Oh
still
yeah,
English,
yeah.
but it's got like a lot of influence from their life in Jamaica itself, for example.
Mm-hmm. And French, I think there's a lot of influence from French and stuff in that one
Yeah, I
too.
think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the Scottish accent myself, because
Yeah.
it's always a gamble, right? When you meet somebody with a Scottish accent, you can either understand them, or it's like you're just lost, and it's like, oh, this is baffling. I have no
You
idea what's
just do
going
this and laugh,
on. Yeah, you're like,
and you get by.
just offer them some tea.
Yeah, I'm not gonna try my impression of that. But the other one that, and I find it interesting, the Jamaican accent reminds me so much of the Irish accent. Do you get that too?
Really? No, I don't. Oh, you know
They
what?
feel so similar for me.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know that they do feel similar for
Mhm.
me. That's an interesting one.
During some time, I actually did some work, which was quality assessment. So I would get audios from a company from Europe. They had
Mm-hmm.
clients that needed to do location, I think is the word, of like ads and stuff like that into Spanish, and they needed to make sure that the recordings that they had were being aimed or sold, let's say, in the correct regions of Latin America and the Spanish-speaking countries. So I would get audios of people, and I would have to like tell them, okay, this is Colombia, this is Mexico, this is Puerto Rico, this is
Uh-huh.
Latin America, like, or I mean, this is Rio de la Plata, which would be Uruguay and Argentina. We have a very similar
Mm-hmm.
accent, so the same ads that could come here could go over there. And that was a really interesting job, and I
Oh,
really
that sounds
like
crazy.
getting those nuances and saying, oh, this is a person from this country, this is a person from wherever. I love that. I just love it.
It reminds me of like when you watch like spy shows or detective TV shows, and there's always like, the clever detective who could listen to an accent and be like, oh, you grew up in England and then you spent 4 months in Utah, and then you went back to Scotland, and your accent is this weird, but I mean,
Yeah, those things like, oh, you're a spy because you pronounce this word differently than the people that are from here. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think all of this, strangely enough, or not strangely enough, because everything connects to everything in this net of being, this connects very smoothly, or we can try to make it connect very smoothly into the topic of magic,
Mm-hmm.
because let's kind of just kickstart this with the idea of magic in connection with language and in connection with thought and and the expression of our ideas into the material world, right?
Yeah, actually, I was actually just thinking about language and magic earlier today. Uh, you know, depending on what you're looking at with magic, there's like this grimoire tradition where there are all these, you know, old Renaissance spell books filled with like prayers in Latin and prayers in like all these other languages and stuff. And I think people sometimes get really hung up on that language, and which is but the interesting thing is, like, if you watch the development of that as you go along, a lot of the grimoires from before the 16th century, they're Catholic, so the language in the grimoires, the prayers that they use and stuff, have a lot of like really Catholic heavy symbolism and Catholic heavy wording. But then when you get after 1517 and you get into, you know, the early modern stuff, there's lots of Protestant grimoires that come along that just strip out all of the Catholic imagery and just keep this sort of like Protestant Christian stuff in their prayers. And it was kind of making me think of, you know, people get like really hung up on like which version of the prayers are they supposed to use or which version of grimoires are they supposed to use. But you can kind of get this impression from the way that that stuff developed. You know, people were writing down, I feel like it was more like people were writing down examples of prayers or things where it's like, that's what, you know, this is what I did, but, you know, this might work well if you adapt it into your own religion or your own whatever, you know, because a lot of the magic stuff predates Christianity or came to Christianity through either Islam or like, you know, the pagan Mediterranean area or something like that. So there was all this, you know, all the prayers were being changed all the time. Like every culture sort of adapted them to themselves. And I guess it goes along with language, you know, in like supernatural, paranormal TV shows in the English speaking world, at least, there's always these jokes about like all of the magic spells and all the magic books are always in Latin, you know, treating it as this exotic language that just sort of has magic innately woven into it. And interestingly enough, that idea of magic being sort of part of the language goes back to, you know, all kinds of traditions that have that. I guess Kabbalah is probably the strongest one, the one that people know about the most, where Hebrew is sort of thought to be the language of creation and the language of, you know, sort of like the divine tongue. So it's funny that we treat Latin that way in so much fiction and entertainment, I think, because I guess I very rarely do any prayers in their original language. I kind of want to know what the heck I'm saying. Maybe I should try. Maybe it's time. I need to start doing all of my magic spells in Latin, poorly pronounced, that I can barely see if I get more power.
I believe it's fun. There's so much that you bring up that I want to touch on. Let me see if I can. So there's, on the one hand, as I was listening, I think of the orthodoxy or the we call them kind of fanatics or something like that sometimes.
Oh yeah, or fundamentalist.
Fundamentalist, yeah. That's the word I was looking for. Or like Puritans, like, oh no, the thing must be done how our ancestors did it or whatever. And sometimes there's this mistake of thinking it must be done in that way because our ancestors, whatever. But then you bring up, yeah, but actually your ancestors received it from somebody else who did it in another language, and maybe even did it praying to different or differently named entities or archetypes, whatever. So your fundamentalism is actually kind of wrong, because if it had to be the way you're saying, you should actually be doing it in whatever the first language was. Maybe you should be doing it in what's it called? It's like Ursprach or something like that. Yeah. I don't know how to pronounce that word.
The Ursprach.
Yeah.
Yeah,
or just in noises, in glossolalia, whatever.
Yeah. And maybe, you know, I guess that but that also makes me think of like, you know, like barbarous names, you know, the existence of these like old chanted names that go back, you know, we have them in the Greek magical papyri from, you know, 200 AD. And they're all these weird chanted names that probably pre-exist those guys. You know, it was like ancient magic and spells that got passed down to them, and they're like, we don't know what language this is, but we better keep these names the same. And then those names end up adapting and evolving over time, so they end up like as goetic spirits and archangels and all kinds of stuff. And that, so it is kind of funny, there are like there are still a lot of weird old words that I guess we could say are kind of nonsense words. Nobody knows what they mean anymore. Nobody knows where they came from. They've just always been around. And they're all kind of fun to say too. They're lots of weird noises and strange vowels. And I mean, they're perfect for chanting and stuff, but do we know what they mean? No.
Yeah, and there's this whole other like side topic of a kind of amnesia that we have as a species, or as a culture, whatever, that we look at the different pantheons, because we're bringing up like the ideas of archetypes and entities and gods or whatever, because in part it's connected with magic. We might get into how that is connected, but we look at the different pantheons, and there's always, or in general with these polytheistic cultures, we usually have the thunder god is like the king of the gods. Then you have the fire god, the water god, the goddess of fertility, the goddess of the moon, the one for what's this called, agriculture, etc. You go into the Celts, the pagans, you have the goddess or the god of the horses, and you go into, like, we don't really know the timeline, what order it actually had. We don't even know what really time is in order to say there must be an order. We don't know how the cycles are actually working, and how much the past is influencing the future, but also the future is influencing the past. And as we develop and as we write our present, we are shaping the past as well. And I think that's a very nice place where magic comes in. And so before I was saying, okay, you have the fundamentalism, but then you have this other more, I kind of subscribe a little bit to both very fluidly. This more like, I don't know how to call it, but intuitive or liberal or whatever kind of way of approaching magic, in that, like you said, people would like record certain grimoires or certain prayers and say, okay, this prayer contains the raw elements expressed perhaps in a particular language. And like today, I think during these mystic times that we're living through, we are starting to go at in programming, I think they call it the architecture. No, what's the lenguaje? It's kind of like the root language. I'm blanking on the word right now. The assembly language is the word they use. You know about that? And it's kind of a very deep language that is underneath all the programming languages. And the different grimoires have like, so it's like everything we're speaking is programming the projection of reality that we're living in. We each have our own individual projection, and at the same time it's dancing with the collective projection, or dancing within the collective projection as well. And through these things, okay, what are the raw elements of magic? Like we're calling it, maybe sometimes now calling it manifestation or reality creation. It's like, okay, it doesn't need to be exactly this prayer in this language, but the prayer has certain elements that are connected. I think one of the main ingredients is belief, right? If you don't know what you're saying, it might have a kind of morphic field and it might work. For example, I heard there's this study that they did with mantra, and they gave people a random gibberish mantra, and then they gave them, I think, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and they recorded the results. I don't remember exactly what way it was that they recorded it, but the Maha Mantra had a more powerful effect than the gibberish, even with people that didn't know the Maha Mantra from before. So it's like the mantra itself, for having been used for so long, it has created a kind of gravity to it, or a kind of energy. So, okay, do it in Latin, it will have its power. But if you do it in something that you resonate personally with, it will also have a powerful effect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's again, like there's a lot of stuff in there I kind of want to touch on. Like, it's hard to know. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that, if you just get a spell, like a magic spell out of a book, and you can't, maybe it's all in Latin, you don't know what it is, you don't know what it's supposed to do, and you read it, I don't think anything would happen. I think honestly, like that's a point where, I think intent and belief are both really, really important. I think that there's a lot of overlapping things that probably happen, like, the language you use, this is a tough one, because I think that part of it has to do with kind of like the paradigm that your magic is in. You were talking about like manifestation, which is a very almost kind of like 20th century kind of view of magic, where a lot of it is reliant on the psychological state of the practitioner, the psychological state and the psychology of the person who's doing the operation. But I think that there's been a lot of kind of movement back towards kind of like an earlier paradigm, or trying to adapt an earlier paradigm, which is the idea of correspondences of, energies or natures, or kind of like I want to relate them to sort of like Platonic forms or ideas that kind of like overlap in this, projection of the physical reality that we all share. And I think it can go along with that concept that you're talking about of, each of us having sort of our own kind of bubble of perception and projection, and the world that we share being sort of the overlap of all of those, right? Where kind of like the Venn diagram, meets the 7 billion points of overlap that kind of like create the, human experience on our planet, or in our wherever the hell we are. And I think that one of the things that magic tries to do is it tries to align your intent with an outcome by drawing in as many of these overlapping things that are, not necessarily part of the human experience, but part of some sort of like greater cosmic celestial experience. That's why, magicians will talk about like different planets and correspondences, and like, where you're talking about the gods, you might, light a candle for the fire god, or use the color red, or do these things that draw in or overlap with the, like the Platonic ideal of fire or whatever. It's sort of, and language definitely is in there too. I think in particular, we have a lot of stuff about sound and music, and how it sort of overlaps with these sorts of things. Both of us are from cultures that were really heavily influenced by, the Catholic Church in Europe and stuff. And out of that, we get this idea of like different scales and tones corresponding to different moods and different ways of thinking, and different, even different planets, like the different, astrological correspondences of music. I think that there's a lot of overlapping correspondence that goes into, magic being effective or workable. And it's and it tends to be not, I think, lateral in terms of other people as much as it is almost kind of vertical, with like higher planes of existence, or, man, these things are really difficult to talk about sometimes. But is this making some sense?
Yeah, definitely. Let me jump in. You alluded back to the idea of, and you mentioned the Venn diagram connecting, and I remember the word, and I just looked it up to kind of confirm if it's the idea, and it kind of is. The word is the noosphere.
Oh yeah, the
noosphere.
Well, I don't know if I know exactly about the concept, but I can kind of figure it out just from the word itself. That would be sort of like the nous is mind, or like a concept of sort of like mind spirit, that it's a it's a higher level of our reality, something that is sort of pre-existent of the physical reality.
Yeah, and the way I understand it is that it's in my own words, it's kind of this electromagnetic field around the planet, which is, I wouldn't say that it connects all the human minds or all the minds. More, I would say that it's kind of emergent from the existence of all these small or individual minds. They kind of, like the Venn diagrams, they merge together and interconnect. It's kind of a kind of an internet of minds, a blockchain of minds or something like that. And I think there is where, if what's the name, the 100th monkey thing, where an idea can pop up somewhere in the planet and at the same time pop up somewhere else, because it's kind of like a ripple that is, I don't know, maybe holographic, so it's everywhere at any moment, and that's a way in which, so in that kind of field, in that noosphere, maybe, if somebody understands this better, please comment and correct me or correct us. In this noosphere, we're just improvising and coming up with ideas. In this place, I believe it's where all this old information is stored, ancient, it's stored there, and it's been shaping the human mind across time. And so if you do the prayer in Latin, you're drawing from the power that it has because of it being in this collective mind, the collective consciousness, perhaps, of humanity. You're drawing from there. If you do it in your own way, or in your own, like, if you do your own practice that you created yourself in your own language, and you do it like within your mind or before you're going to bed, those kind of, you're kind of maybe sending some new information into the thing, but at the same time it's kind of like a two-way street, you're also drawing from, because for example, using the one in Latin, it's already stored there, and it's stored in Latin, but it's the what was it, the
like the meaning, or the
and that language that I said before for programming,
the assembly language.
The assembly language is stored along with the Latin language, because the Latin language is like written on top of the assembly language. So when you're doing it yourself, you are also unknowingly using the assembly language and translating it into your own way of doing things. And I'm not sure if I have a final point in this logic. You can jump in anytime you want.
Well, I'm kind of thinking, I mean, that's an interesting way of looking at it. So when you started off talking about the noosphere, you were talking about it being something that is emergent from all of the minds on the planet. But then the way you were describing it, it almost seems like the minds on the planet would have to emerge from the noosphere. It might be the other way around.
I think it's this kind of loop. I don't know, the
Sort
chicken
of
or the egg, which one is
feeding
first
thing, right?
Okay. It's something that kind of we create because there are whichever minds alive now and those in the past, they've been like feeding into this electromagnetic field, and at the same time, then the field feeds into us. Kind of this idea that they say, does art imitate reality, or does reality imitate art? At this point, it's an engine that's going forward, and how it started initially, I don't know, but it's right, something kind of loop, a virtuous
self-fulfilling
cycle,
or like it's a Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think I would probably, like, I like this idea, but I think I would not call it an electromagnetic field because I don't think
Mm,
that it exists in a way that we can necessarily measure in the physical
mm,
world, right? Like, I don't think we're ever going to be able to get like an antenna that you can wave around somebody's head and be like, oh, here's your connection to the noosphere. I think that I think that mind or nous, that the mind part of it exists a in a in a way that precedes physical reality, right? It's something outside of the physical realm that we probably can't measure in the physical world. All we can do is sort of see the impression
its
left
effects,
by it.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the effects of this noosphere, let's keep using that
Mhm.
term, even if it might be wrong. The effects of the
I feel like
noosphere,
if we talk about it wrongly long enough, we will
yeah,
influence the noosphere. So
yeah,
our definition will be the right one after this
yes,
video.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What was I saying? That the effect. So we can't maybe measure mind, but we can measure its effects. And so, what are the effects of the noosphere that we could measure? It's not like, okay, we put an antenna and we get a blip or a sinusoid wave or whatever. The
Mhm.
effects of the noosphere is ourselves. It's our ideas, our actions, our physical world. Because again, the mind being something prior to the physical, or maybe the mind being more like the assembly language and the physical being a, a posterior or later development of it. The
Mhm.
material world is the evidence or the effect of this thing, of this mind, and we're living in it. It's like we are
Yes.
spiritual beings, right? And in
Yeah.
order to be in the physical world, it's all of this is kind of like paradoxical, and because you can always ask, yeah, but then the physical world already existed for the mind to come in. Okay, let's not get into that one yet. But if the spiritual being needs to get into the physical world, it needs a material body, which it kind of makes out of the raw materials available perhaps in this kind of noosphere. And so it can't make a, a blue human being or maybe yes, but a green human being wouldn't be like the standard kind of body that it would be able to make, because for some reason it's not already in the, it hasn't been like created by
Yeah.
those before. It can,
Well, I
yeah.
think because the physical world has to fit together like a big puzzle, right? Like there are
Mm.
all of these rules and ways that the physical world acts, and everything has to fit together in a pretty specific way in order for us to even be here. There's oh man, I wish I could remember the name of this, but there's a uh theory, one of the like intelligent design adjacent theories, which talks about a purpose-built universe. Like it seems that the mechanics of the universe have been tuned to allow Earth to exist with life on it and teeming with you know life of all sorts and lots of crabs in particular.
Is that like connected to like teleology or something like that?
I think
Telos,
so. I can't. I
purpose.
really can't
Oh.
remember all the details. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to like intelligent design theories because I think they end up getting pulled too often into there's so many
Mm.
I guess one of my pet peeves is like when people try to you know pit um like science and religion against each other as if they're like enemies and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and intelligent design gets used as a weapon in that a lot, and it's just sort
Mm.
of like this is not it's not productive. Like you can't the things that they're looking for don't overlap. you
Mm.
know they're trying to answer different sorts of questions and different types of questions, and yeah, that's that's sort of like why I wouldn't want to call the noosphere an electromagnetic
Mm.
field, because that then it would indicate that it's something that physical science could measure. And I think that it's important for people who are on spiritual paths to understand that like your internal experience, your mystical experience, or the experience that your spirit or your nous is having, is not invalidated by the fact that it can't be picked up by scientific instruments. You know, that's not necessarily what we're trying to do or why we're here. You know, we're not having mystical experiences in order for them to be measured. We're having mystical experiences in order to learn about ourselves and improve ourselves and improve our connection with, you know, whatever we think is out there, whether it's a noosphere or it's God or it's some sort of like transcendent experience. You know, like we're looking for that connection. It doesn't need to show up on a, you know, voltometer or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Or you made me think of a Voltronometer. You remember that the robot that got made with the different parts, Voltron?
When I was a kid, that was on like after school or before school, and I loved that show. They made a new one. Netflix made a new one. It's really good,
wow.
but you know, that's not what your show's about.
Yeah, or it can be an analogy or a metaphor for something, for sure. There were so many different shows of like the same style, you know. I remember also the Power Rangers. That one was more like when I was smaller. I was born in '88, so the Voltron, I think, is like before I was born, but it was shown on TV when I was like a little bit older. But I'm more like the Power Rangers. And you have this concept of different parts, different archetypes coming together to form a larger one. So you have this similar.
Oh, yeah, that's true. And they had sort of a symbolism to them, right? Like each element had their own thing. So like the Power Rangers, you know, had all the different colors. I assume each color was associated as like, you know, pink Power Ranger is, I don't know, love or whatever. And Voltron had sort of the same idea. And then of course there was Captain Planet. I don't know if you guys had,
when I was small, when I was a child, I remember that I wanted to change my name to Captain Planet. That's what I wanted my name to be. That much is how much I love the ideas in Captain Planet.
I mean, I would call you Captain Planet.
I wanted to be a policeman, and I wanted to call myself Capitan Planeta. That was my favorite name when I was small.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you'd run into like copyright problems, probably. But maybe Admiral Planet.
Yeah. So before we drift from the topic, if we haven't
before already, we start.
So to stay on topic, we started talking about this idea of a collective mind all around the world, because I say that kind of the prayers may be stored there, but whatever. It's just an idea that it helps me to kind of understand the thing. But the idea is behind magic is that however it works, the idea is that it works. The idea is you can, through your intention and your belief, you mentioned, and through your will, you can cause change to happen in the world. For me, one of the first times my path into all of this kind of started through metaphysics, or first through kind of conspiracies, then through metaphysics, then through more like Eastern spirituality. And for me, it was like, it was more kind of materialistic in a way. And so I started meditating, and I realized how, in a very subtle way, when I meditated or when I had periods of extended periods of meditation, I saw my life changing in a way that was very subtle to like pinpoint. You could just say, yeah, coincidence. You started meditating and good stuff started happening in your life, but who knows if it wouldn't have happened anyway. But through trial and error, you kind of start seeing the correlation of the two things. You stop meditating for some time, and you see a different type of effect in your life. And I think you're kind of like with a horse, you're like training the horse, training the mind to create or to project or reflect what your best life outside, perhaps, or to create your most polished kind of bubble, individual bubble that can then feed into this collective thing. And we're doing that, each one of us. And again, I don't know what my point was.
Yeah, let's go back to, sort of defining what magic is, because I think,
Let's do that.
because I think that the definition you gave is an interesting one, sort of like the concept of, imposing your will on the world, or creating change based just on will. And I, over the years that I've been practicing, I've kind of gone away from that more and more. Like I feel like will is important, but it's not so much of a wrestling match of like your will against the world, as much as it is working with, like I was talking before, like with the idea of correspondences, or like aligning influences in a way that sort of like helps things along. And I think that it's also important to kind of look at how, there are sort of broadly two types of magic. One of them is thaumaturgy, or kind of like wonder working, the idea that you can like do a sigil and help pay your rent or something of that nature. And the other one is theurgy, which is sort of like the divine magic of like sort of trying to elevate yourself and elevate your soul and becoming sort of like more in tune with things. And both of those kind of work together. Like the better you get at one, the better you'll get at theurgy, the better you might get at thaumaturgy, or the more your magic sort of reflects kind of like an inner work, or includes kind of like an inner work, like say your meditation or whatever, the more effect you will have in the real world. And a lot of this will depend on, kind of like the tradition. Magic is broken up into so many different approaches, and it's hard to really have one blanket statement that covers all of them. But I did an episode on my podcast recently that examined Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa's definition of magic. And one of the things that I did is I went through a lot of other people's definitions of magic, and I was like, here's what the Golden Dawn said, here's what chaos magic said, here's what Aleister Crowley said, and et cetera, and then looked at Agrippa's definition out of the Renaissance, where I don't know how it is down there, but in the English speaking world, people love the 3 books of occult philosophy, and they're a very big influence. I'm not sure what the equivalent, so 3 books of occult philosophy was originally written in Latin, but it was German. So I'm kind of wondering if Spanish areas might have had a different kind of influential text.
I never heard about them. Can you, or maybe I have, but I'm not familiar with the name.
The
It's
Latin
like
name is
a book that is called the 3 books.
Yeah, it's a book called it's basically called Occulta Philosophia Libri Tres in Latin, the 3 books of occult philosophy. And it was written in the 16th century, so in the 1500s. And it's basically just this huge encyclopedia of Renaissance magic. So it has, a lot of sort of like herbalism in the first part of it. And then the second part has a lot of like astrology and celestial magic. And then the third part is like divine magic. It involves, spirits and Kabbalah and things like that. And it's a huge tome. And it's kind of been a really popular encyclopedia for Western magic, at least during the 20th and 21st centuries. And before that, it's been around for a long time, and it's been pretty influential. But nobody really takes a very close look at it because the book is really big and it's been really difficult to read and really difficult to get into. But recently, some really good English translations came out, or new English translations. The previous one was from 1651, and it was just, old. It was old.
A kick in the balls to read.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but
so the new
maybe kind of poetic as well, right?
Yeah, poetic, but difficult. It was like before people thought about doing paragraphs or sentences. So the new translations have made them, accessible to the world in a new way, and so I've been taking a closer look, and it's interesting because the way that magic was kind of looked at back then, I don't think I think that it takes some massaging and kind of shoehorning to get it to fit into what Western magic is kind of like turned into in the 20th century and the 21st century. I think the Golden Dawn, in particular, has been really influential. But one of the things that they kind of did is they sort of ushered in this era of us thinking that magic is all psychological. And that's new. That's a new idea. Like this old magic, it's not psychological. A lot of it relies on things that are outside of you. You're interfacing with all of the cosmos, and it's not just stuff that's in your mind. It's the fact that your mind is part of not just the noosphere that we've our noosphere, but beyond into something more cosmic and more divine. Like we're just our physical experience and even our psychological experience is kind of like the tip of an iceberg, and we've got access to something much larger and greater and vaster in the cosmos.
Yeah, we're like the limbs of a larger body of some kind.
Yeah. Yes.
The experiencing. What's the name I'm looking for? The experiencing organs of a kind of.
Oh yeah,
beingness.
Like the sense organs. Yeah. And I think that's.
So
I think that.
Let me ask you something.
Okay.
So you're saying that difference between like the more modern understanding of magic, more in relationship to psychological states, with that older one more thought of as the interfacing with the material world. Yeah, am I understanding well? And maybe we could be moving next to a kind of amalgamation of the two, an integration of those two things.
Yeah, maybe. I think it wasn't really interfacing with the material world as much as it was interfacing with the cosmic world. I think both of them include an interface with the material world. It's just that the 20th century one is like a psychological thing, and the Renaissance one is more cosmic. Not just limited to the individual person, but sort of how does that person's mind and soul interact with everything, with a greater picture, a bigger scene.
In these three books, is the word God used?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
It's definitely Catholic, right? Like the author wrote it. I think he remained Catholic through his entire life.
And when I ask, is the word God used? I don't mean it only in the Catholic sense, right? But I think of it in, so like, are they trying to interface just with because the idea perhaps of a material world is perhaps it's newer, it's later. So they are trying to interface with creation.
Yes. And interestingly, like it's not just like the Christian view that's in there, right? There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's just metaphor, that okay, the author was Catholic, so he understood it perhaps in a very Catholic way. But if you are able to free yourself from if we are able to free ourselves from our preconceptions or our discrimination or because of the influence of Catholicism, we might be like reticent of the language. But again, it's just words that are trying to express something deeper, I think. And for me, the idea from Hinduism, you know, Brahman, when I read God, okay, it's talking about this thing that is expressing through all of us and which is inside all of us. So it's that older interpretation of the definition of magic has more to do with that, with kind of reconnecting the small soul, let's say, with the larger soul, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Because I'm not Catholic or I'm not even Christian, and I still use Agrippa's work. I still use the 3 books. But one of the things that I wanted to mention is that, like, he doesn't keep it to just Christian stuff. You know, there's Kabbalah in there. There's lots of planetary spirits. He has some of the Orphic hymns, you know, referencing like Greek and pagan gods, and they're all sort of like treated with a sort of, you know, there's a sense of equality, or there's a sense of inclusion. And then there's even a lot of like influence from Arabic magic and Arabic images of, you know, like lunar mansions and planetary things and stuff like that. So there's a lot in there that, you know, it's not like a Catholic person is going to read it and be like, this is Catholicism. They're going to read it and be like, this is super weird.
This is heresy. Burn him.
Yeah, for sure. And so, you know, I think that that's kind of an interesting thing to keep in mind there. Like, I don't want to make a claim that the 3 books of occult philosophy is a Catholic grimoire. It's magic, and
it's
written
the
by
Renaissance, a person who had perhaps Catholic metaphors at hand to express the ideas.
Well, because that was how he was raised. It's where he grew up. It was his whole world. You know, there
it's
was
like me. I say the thing is an electromagnetic field, because that's just how I understand. That's how you envision it,
right? Because that's what you learned in school. That's you know, you've grown up dealing with electromagnetic fields and how they screw with your microphone and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I think that's a really good example. That's a really good example where, like, when you say electromagnetic field, you don't literally mean it, you know, but it's just the image that we can call to mind, you know, because all of us have seen, like, you know, pictures of the magnetosphere, pictures of how magnetic waves work and stuff. Like, we have that in our mind. It's how we communicate over great distances with no, you know, tin can with a string sort of thing. Like, it's funny when it was just thinking about how, you know, I think I bring this up every time we talk, but the fact that, like, we're 4,000 miles away, right? Something like that, like a really long distance away. And we can talk with pretty much no delay, as far as I can tell. And it's just so funny to think about it, because we don't really know how our information is getting, you know, back and forth. Like, we don't have a map of this. Like, where is my electrical signal going? Does it go through space? Is it just over wires? Is it getting beamed up to a satellite and back down again? I have no idea. But here we are.
No, it's amazing. It is true magic. Sometimes we think of and this word technology. It's this is an interesting place for us to maybe
yes, I like this topic.
To start kind of winding down the first hour, we can take a short break and come back with this idea. But the idea of technology, you know, we think recently I wrote something down. I'll kind of try to remember my notes, but we think of technology as like something out there that is kind of made of metal with cables and electricity. Through our culture, we've been kind of unknowingly we've been changing the definition of technology towards that kind of thing. But then you think again so you try to say, okay, or this is how I kind of think sometimes. Okay, so we think of technology as something outside made of metal and cables and electricity. Okay, what if we kind of turn it around and say, okay, is there something inside that is not made of metal and cables that we could call technology? And then you think, okay, you think about things that for some people might be very woo-woo, but you think about yoga, you think about meditation and these practices that you're bringing up, these magical practices. You think about all of that stuff, and are those things able to have a kind of similar effect on our lives as the outside metal kind of technology? I think they do, and in fact they feel primary for me.
Yeah, I think that this would be a really good topic. We should definitely, I can spend some time talking about this. I have some thoughts.
Awesome. You want us to take a break now, or you want to
let's
give
take a
that
little
kind of
break.
fun? Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. All right,
awesome. So thank you, everybody. Please, Eric, don't lose your train of thought, but also please share some of your link to your podcast, to your whatever you want to share for people to find you and to get in touch with you, or I know you have some courses on magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's everything can be found at arnemancy.com, ARNEMANCY.com. Like, I've got all of my stuff is there. And I guess that's kind of where you find me. I've got a YouTube channel, I've got a podcast and a blog, and there are courses and stuff there and stuff you can find too.
Perfect. I will be sharing that link on the description below the video. This will probably be in two separate videos, but I want to thank everybody for being there, for joining us in this very fun and beautiful conversation once again with Erik Arneson. Also, you can get in touch with me. Of course, you can comment on the video, but you can also find the link to my Instagram where you can direct message me. I also have a Patreon, which you're all more than welcome to join in order to help support the show and all these crazy ideas, and especially I'm trying I am building community there. Slowly we're trying to see where can we talk about all of these ideas and share and know. For me, podcasts was something that showed me that I wasn't alone. I felt very alone for a time, and I want to create a space for people to feel a sense of community, a sense of being not being alone, having and talking about these ideas, or thinking about these ideas and not having somebody to share them with. That's a very heavy burden, it can be very, very depressing. So you're all very much welcome there. I'm going to start doing Akashic Records readings for the group as soon as we have a large enough group. We'll see. I'm sharing some sound healing sessions there from the music that I make. And there's also exclusive episodes that haven't been shared on the YouTube. So you're all very welcome to go there. I'm very happy once again to have Erik Arneson with me, and I'm very happy to have you guys there. So stay tuned, and we'll see you guys on the second hour. Bye-bye.